Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar at Digital Home Systems. My name is Jerzy Zawicki, and today we will be talking about Home Center 3, Fibaro Home Center 3. As I mentioned, my name is Jerzy Zawicki. I'm one of the directors of Digital Home Systems. We are running Wednesday webinars on different topics related to smart home technologies, and specifically on KNX before, and from now we'll be talking more about Z-Wave wireless smart home technologies. So let me show you what we have done so far in terms of webinars. Right, so this is what we've been doing for last couple of months. Primarily we've been focusing on KNX technology and Comfort Click gateway and visualization tool. We also were talking about NICE gate systems provided by NICE Australia, and we were talking last week about ability to integrate HVAC systems with either KNX Comfort Click or with Z-Wave gateways, including Fibaro Home Center 2 and 3 and Lite. It's a perfect link to today's webinar topic. We'll be talking about new Fibaro Home Center 3 gateway, which will be released in Australia in about a month or two. We expect it in July. So this is what we've been talking so far about. In a couple of weeks, we'll start a new series of our webinars. We'll be specifically talking about different Z-Wave topics, Z-Wave related topics. We'll be talking more about gateways, platforms, Z-Wave gateway platforms, and we'll be talking about different Z-Wave devices or type of devices. So stay tuned. More you will find on our digitalhomesystems.com.au page under training and webinars. Few words about Digital Home Systems, who we are, what we're doing. We are Australian-based, Melbourne-based distributor of Z-Wave smart home technologies. We specialize in Z-Wave, and we also distribute KNX wired technology. We provide not only products, but also professional technical support. We offer training programs for our partners installers, and we also offer the referral program where we offer some installation jobs to our best installers all over Australia. This is the topic of today. Discover the Fibaro Home Center 3. The presentation will be delivered by Mark Vernon, our technical guru from Digital Home Systems. Just in regards to questions and answers and how long the webinar will take, we expect around 30 minutes to deliver the topic, and then we'll have around 15 minutes for questions and answers. If you have any questions now or during the presentation, just type them in the chat window on the right hand side, or if you see this webinar later in replay mode, by all means, type your question in the comments field below. If you're seeing us on our YouTube channel, there will be a comments panel directly under the webinar screen, and we will come back to you. We'll respond to your question as soon as possible.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark from Digital Home Systems. I'm the head of tech support. So today's presentation, we're going to be handling Fibaro Home Center 3. As Jerzy has said beforehand, we currently don't have it in Australia. We're expecting around a month late July. But this is essentially just what you'd expect for us to actually have once it actually comes into Australia. So yes, the title of it is Discover Home Center 3. As just before, this will be a little bit of an information pack. Some things have actually changed from Fibaro Home Center 2s. So a lot of this stuff is going to be a bit new to people. So currently it's been in development for quite a while. It's meant to be the most modern and reliable device that allows for easy control, especially in the world of Raspberry Pis and other controllers. Generally, they try to make a control that's a bit more intuitive and actually useful for your everyday user, instead of having a bit of coding knowledge necessary to actually run the entire thing. As you can see, it controls gates, blinds, HVAC systems, mood, which is general lighting controls, multimedia is a new system for it, safety, smart gardens, so irrigation systems, security, and of course lightings, which is what most people use for automations. Yeah. So generally, the first time they released their Home Center 3, they made it so it was used for the essentially your top end people who are doing stuff. So you could make a lot of complex little steps through your systems, but you sort of had to look around and actually try and find some documentation for it. What they have tried to do in your Home Center 3 is actually make it a bit more user-friendly. Not saying it wasn't user-friendly beforehand on your Home Center Lights and Home Center 2s, but they're actually trying to help your everyday installer, everyday customer, so it's actually a lot easier to essentially convince clients to actually get through your automation system using Fibaro. So firstly, we're going to cover some of the specs for it. It's twice as powerful. They've essentially got rid of their old 2-core processors and replaced them with a more modern-day 4 processor. Then they have also given you an entire gigabyte more RAM. As you'd expect from a lot of these systems, what these essentially mean is you'll be able to control a lot more devices. You would start experiencing slowdowns after you got some 80 or so devices in your previous Fibaro systems, but with this, we're expecting quite a lot more control and quite a lot more automation that doesn't actually cause it to, let's just say, begin to slow down its processor. Scroll wheel, apologies for that. And a lot larger memory, which is good because that'll essentially mean that you can actually store a lot more like codes and let's say virtual devices and everything on your actual system itself. Generally, that's just a essentially stability requirement. Generally, you didn't have issues where you're running out of space beforehand, but having more space in your actual devices, as we all know, is more applicable to having minimum space than the high quality content. It's also getting increased range. The actual antenna has been optimized for it. So generally, your previous Home Center 2 had about 100 meters range, give or take a bit depending upon your actual generalized environment. Added range will be very useful because that means that your first hop from your actual controller to connected relay devices will actually be a lot more stable. So you'll experience less delays at the end of your line than you would previously on your Home Center 2's old light controller. Now, something they have added in is what they call the triple data security system. Now, what they've actually done is they have made it so you actually have 2 copies of your operating system running at, essentially not running at the same time, but you have a backup copy for it. Previously, you had essentially what was called System A, which is your actual interface you saw, and then your bootloader, which is loaded onto a USB drive. What they've actually done is added an additional one on top of that. So if your first system fails, it'll go into System B. And then if your System B fails on top of that, it'll then go to your bootloader to actually refresh your systems. So instead of it going into the issues where you would have, let's just say your boot A fail and boot C fail, you then have to get on tech support to get them to fix it. You now have an additional step for it. So if you have realized your System A's failed, you're in that area where it comes down to you might want to try and contact technical support, see what's actually caused that issue, or you can continue running your system until the possibly B1 fails. But chances are, considering what we've seen with our Home Center 2s, generally the entire system failing is a very rare occurrence, but having the additional security of having a backup actually installed on that cloud is very useful. As you can also see, your user data is actually stored between System A, System B, a cloud backup, and local backups as well. So you don't have to worry about having to load a cloud backup, so having internet connection in order to actually, let's just say, back up your system. You can have local ones which you can actually store on personal devices. So computers, USBs, just in case your system for some reason has a hiccup in it and you need to reload it back up. So somebody's, let's just say your son or your daughter has for some reason found their way onto your interface and has started meddling with some things, and you want to get back to where you were beforehand. Local backups are more applicable than cloud backups, but they also back up to the cloud just in case. Now, safety is something that was actually covered a lot using Fibaro devices. Anyone who's using the previous Fibaro 2 platform knows about the Fibaro ID authentication, how it actually constantly sends you emails in case, like an example, if you were to move from one computer to another computer, it would actually inform you that a new device had logged in, and it would essentially flag it as suspicious, so it'll give you information for it. They've also improved their encryption of user data. Their actual connection to the cloud servers have been improved as well, so it's more secure, and the actual local systems are actually more defensible as well. General security updates are what you'd expect from more common day products, and hopefully they're very good, up to par, as you might call them. Now, if anyone's used the previous Fibaro devices, such as Fibaro Lite or Fibaro 2, you would have remembered that there is, first time you set up, there is what you would call a configuration wizard. That has been overhauled. It is now a much more streamlined process, as some may have remembered setting up your entire GPS coordinate system and having your phone numbers essentially being a bit jumbling. They've essentially just made it so you can just customize your stuff from the get-go and just very easily set it up how you want it to be. So you want an alarm panel, you want it to be on a static IP address instead of a DHCP one, or stuff like that. Now they've actually rehauled the entire device panel as well. If anyone's remembered, the previous device panel had a general and advanced tab. They've actually just merged those together because they found that having to go back between tabs to actually try and just do small things such as change your room or essentially modify a parameter, having to then save and then having to change back to your tabs if you want to make an adjustment is just unnecessary hassle. So they've just made it that all your device's information is on the same device tab, so you can just easily scroll through and find all the necessary information you need or anything you need to change for it. Assigning rooms, changing device numbers, so on and so forth. Something they have actually added, which is actually very useful, is they have added in what are called personalized household profiles. So as you can see from that little tab there, there's 4 little modes you can set up. So home, away, and so on and so forth. These will be really useful for situations where with the previous alarm systems you could have set up, it was either your system was armed or your system was disarmed. There was no real in between for it. With this, you can actually set up so when certain events happen, such as you change from home and away mode, you can actually have lights turn on, or when you disarm your system, so you essentially go from being at work to being back at home, you can actually have your security system disarm itself. So you don't have to walk in and hear a siren start blaring because you've forgotten to turn it off because you've forgotten your code. Now, advanced schedules. This is actually covered under more climate areas. The previous climate systems revolved a lot around scene control. So if you wanted scenes to turn on and off your heating panel and stuff, you'd have to essentially make an example. If you wanted 5 different temperatures through your entire day, you'd have to end up running 5 different scenes to actually be able to run that entire thing, like essentially without any hassles. They've actually implemented an entire climate control system, which essentially allows you to change seasons. You can set the times for certain events to go through, and also change the temperatures of those certain areas. So just say you, just say in summer, you wake up in the morning, you don't really need your air conditioner on. However, when you leave for work, you get home and you want it to be, you get home roughly, let's say 6 o'clock, and you want it so that when you walk in your house, your home isn't as humid as, just say, spending a good bit of time up at the beach in Queensland. You can actually have a nice, enjoyable time when you get back in, and then have it essentially lower down to a more comfortable point, and then turn off at a certain time at night without having to manually fiddle with wall panels or essentially trigger scenes or use voice control as an example. Good thing for this as well is that you can set up multiple ones on the same days. So if you want it to be, let's just say your partner stays at home and you go to work and your partner prefers it to be a different temperature, when you leave, it can change the temperature to what they would prefer it to be and then change it back and forth from there. Something that's actually also worth noting regarding this, it's not covered under this one, but it's a little interesting little snippet. They've actually added in this same sort of format, but for irrigation systems. So you can actually hook it up in such a way that if you have a, let's say a soil sensor, so it gives you your actual measurements of how, damp the soil is, you can actually have your irrigation system turn on. Or as an example, you want it to irrigate only during the times that's preferable. So essentially when the sun's gone down or the sun's not come up just yet. So yeah. Now, something as well, that's, I was talking about alarms earlier, what they have done, which is very useful, is they've allowed you to actually put all of your alarms into what they call zones, which means that instead of having to manually disarm each individual sensor you want, you can actually have entire sets of sensors that are, an example from this, is the full house, the ground floor, all motion sensors and stuff like that, which means you can actually set up systems where, just say you're going to sleep, it's nighttime, and you want to make it so only your entry devices are active, instead of having to manually click all the devices or essentially setting everything to arm and then manually taking them off, you can actually just very easily just press one button and it'll arm all the specific sensors that you want. So you don't have to worry about getting up and walking around in the middle of the night and having something trip and essentially either send a notification to your phone, ping something, or lo and behold, get an alarm that starts going off in the middle of the night, which essentially annoys everyone. Generally, waking up in the middle of the night, you don't really want to be essentially blared at by a siren. So they also reworked their entire scene setups. What you'd probably be used to beforehand with systems would be they had 3 ones, which was magic scenes, building blocks, and Lao coding. That's been sort of consolidated into a much more user-friendly scenarios. There's a lot more, how am I supposed to describe it? There are a lot more pictures and diagrams of how things work instead of it being the old if-then-that system. It still exists like that. However, it actually, as you can see, shows you a bit more of what is actually happening in that scene, so it's easier to change things. So you notice that your your lights are a certain bit too bright at a certain point in time. You can set up your scenes, so it just comes down to, well, this is the entire tab that's dedicated to this light turning on. So you can just look through that and just change that accordingly, instead of having to and ah about which one's your actual light control and then find where it is. Now, it does actually come with quite a few integrations. As you can see, there's Amazon Alexa, Google Home, IFTTT, Z-Wave. Though this list is actually small at the current point in time, IFTTT does allow for quite a few more automations, and they are actually expanding this at the moment. It has only been released during this year, so we're expecting this list to actually improve considerably as time progresses. So some other things actually worth noting as well is that unlike the previous controllers, so Home Center 2s and Home Center Lights, you can actually hook these units up by Wi-Fi, which means that you don't actually need to have a cable connection to them anymore, which makes it a bit easier to store them away. You can actually, the previous system for actually entering your Fibaro unit locally was either, if you remembered your IP address, you would type that in, or there was a device you used, there was a little app you could get on your computer called Fibaro Finder. Some people may have had issues with it where, because of how the system works, Fibaro Finder wouldn't actually pick up that unit, and finding the IP for it was a bit of a pain. They've added a little bit of a neat little system where you can actually use your serial number of your actual home center itself to actually connect up to your controller locally, which makes it so you don't have to keep typing in an IP address. You can just favorite the actual controller itself and leave it on DHCP. So what they've also done for it is, there's, as you can see there is Amazon Alexa voice control, Google Assistant voice control. There's another one which isn't listed here, which is actually what they call the Fibaro Smart Bot. Previous users of Home Center 2s might have remembered when they tried to test out Lily. This is essentially a more thorough, fleshed out version of Lily, where you can essentially ask it, is there any doors in my house that are open? Are there any motion sensors active? Things such as, oh, are my lights turned on in these certain areas? So you can get a bit more feedback from your actual controller than you would be able to previously without having to actually look through an app. What they've also included is what they call link devices. Link devices are essentially combinations of devices that you have on your system that you can combine together to create one more user-friendly device. So as an example, you can create thermostats. So if you don't actually have, let's just say, Fibaro thermostat, but you still control your system using dry contact relays and actual temperature sensors, you can essentially create a link device, which is a thermostat, which allows you to actually run that as though it was just essentially a thermostat you had. So if you have a system that doesn't exactly support Z-Wave system thermostats, you can just make your own. There's also humidifiers, do the exact same thing, detects humidity, turns things on, turns things off. Video gates as well. It allows you to combine cameras and relays into actual making sort of like an intercom system. You can see the gate, and you can essentially trigger relays to essentially give you pings saying that somebody's at your gate, and also have an override for your actual gate control itself to open it. Something else that's noteworthy as well is sprinkler systems. For irrigation purposes, they can be set up in the same ways. Link devices between humidity sensors, temperature sensors, and so on. Now, something that's more useful. So complementary Z-Wave devices. This is just a bit of stuff that's currently available on the market, which actually works well with the current iteration of Fibaro Home Center controllers. And we're hoping will actually work quite well with Home Center 3 controllers when they get released in July. One moment. So this is actually a newer product that was actually just received in Australia, I believe, a couple of days ago, which is the Dome Door Window Sensor Pro. Much like the Fibaro door window sensors, they actually hook into the system quite well. However, it runs off a lithium battery that has up to 10 years of battery life. Now that has bits and pieces all over the place for it, so that's useful. It has a vastly increased range for it, much like the Home Center 3. The actual antenna has been improved considerably to the point that we were actually surprised when we found out its actual range for it. Has a built-in temperature sensor, much like the Fibaro units, and has very, very quick response times. Essentially also at very long ranges as well, which is a good system you want because it essentially saves you from having an example, you open your wardrobe door and you have to wait about a second and a half or 2 seconds for your actual scene that turns your light to respond. It also comes in a paintable plastic enclosure, so you don't have to worry about the generic branding of white that they currently have available for them. The Fingerprint reader Keypad. This isn't actually a Z-Wave device. However, we will talk about how you can actually make it a Z-Wave device just after this. IP66, so it's a perfect for outdoor use. A metal vandal-proof enclosure. Essentially saves people, for some reason coming through and hitting it with a hammer. I don't know why it would be used for it, but it's useful for areas that, might have the opportunity of somebody just deciding to damage it for some reason. Accepts 1,000 fingerprints and 2,000 pins. All individualized, operates off 12-volt DC, and also has a dry contact output, which allows you to essentially control a door latch. However, it also allows you to control something else, which is actually quite useful, which is it can be used as a dry contact input for the Fibaro Smart Implant. Now, the Fibaro Smart Implant, it has 2 binary sensor inputs, so essentially voltage 3 inputs. 2 individual controller outputs, so essentially that will allow you to actually control, let's just say, a garage door or a gate control or, a door strike. It can allow up to 6 temperature sensors, which is very useful because you can daisy chain them through your house. Operates on 6 to 30 volt, 6 to 30 volt DC, so that's around your 12, 24 volt, which is currently pretty much expected for most DC devices in Australia. And also, once again, has dry contact outputs. So you want to power it up to 12 volts, but switch it via 24 volts. you have the ability to do that. Something else that we actually have, which is pretty much almost identical to the Fibaro Smart Implants, is the Z-Connect garage door controller. It was designed to work with garage doors. It can be used for other methods. Once again, has 2 binary sensor inputs, 2 individual relay outputs, which are dry contacts, 1 temperature sensor input, which is an S-bus, so you can actually hook up things such as motion sensors as well to that, if it supports the S-bus port. 5 to 24 volt DC, once again within your normal range for actual configuration of 12, 24 volts, and once again dry contact outputs. It also has about 30 parameters you can actually change and customize in the actual device itself to essentially get what you need to. So if you wanted to have a pulse contact, that can be active for it. If you want it to be, an example, controlling a electronic door strike, you can have it set up so whenever it essentially stops having voltage put through it, it'll actually reactivate itself after so many seconds. So essentially allows you to, instead of having to make multiple scenes which will turn things on and off, it itself will function, which also allows you to have a bit more control over what you actually do in your house. Then there's the CoolAutomation plugin for CoolAutomation products. We did a previous webinar last week regarding that, which you should actually be able to find on the webinar page. If you want more information, feel free to go see that. There's a very large, the cooling devices, so CoolAutomation devices support actual very large range of products and brands. They actually will occasionally improve the amount of brands that are actually supported, which is actually quite good itself. It's controlled by TCP/IP. In layman's terms, that essentially means that it doesn't require a cloud connection to run your system. It runs everything internally. So if your internet goes down for some reason, or the NBN stuffs up, as you'd sort of expect, you still be able to actually control your system without having to worry about it for some reason your heater being stuck on because the cloud that was controlling it's gone down for maintenance or something. The plugin itself is a universal interface adapter. Once again, in layman terms, that essentially means that the plugin for it will support your cooling hubs, your cooling bridges, and your cool master nets. They all run off the exact same coding structure, so you don't really have to worry about getting a different plugin for each different product for it. They all run off the exact same structure. It also has a customizable user interface. So if you wanted to, an example, if you don't actually have a heat or cooling function on your system and it only has a heat function, you can just remove the entire tab for cool, heat, auto, or dry. Or maybe you want to actually add in a light control to that, so you can run off the same thing, or exhaust fans, or windows, blinds. What you can add into it is essentially up to you, and how you actually want to run your system. Something that's also quite useful. We talked about the CoolAutomation last week. This is the INTESIS HVAC adapters. Now, the INTESIS units actually have a Fibaro market plugin themselves. This is the one that's actually displayed for it. It's very nice to set up. Once again, it's controlled by TCP/IP, much like the CoolAutomation systems. Once again, don't have to rely on a cloud to actually run your own stuff. Very useful to have. Universal interface adapter, yet again, actually runs on the same coding format for all the devices, which is quite good. And how it's actually been set up is the app interface that you actually have for it that's on a tablet is actually looks a lot better than it does on a computer, because they're actually being configured in such a way that, as you can see on the bottom image, that's actually what you would see on your tablet, whereas the image on your right is the one that you see on a computer screen. Makes it a bit more better looking. Also, another product that could be quite useful for HVAC systems is the QUBINO On/Off Thermostat 2. It's designed as a very simple set and forget heat and cooling system. It will run by itself without having to set scenes for it like a normal thermostat system is, but also has a contact relay that has an outgoing for it. It'll actually give you your power consumption, estimated for the unit, within, I believe it's 3% accuracy. It's actually very well suited for heated floors, because most heated floor systems only require a essentially active to them to actually run. and having one of those guys just mounted actually underneath the floor with the little, as you can see, the temperature sensor, the little silver thing, just essentially mounted somewhere underneath that as well. You're going to get a better idea of what the actual temperature is as well. It's also really useful for simple heating and cooling devices. What simple means is essentially devices that don't have very useful thermostat systems. What that means is, just say from your living room, if your thermostat's in your corridor and there's a vent straight above your thermostat, generally it'll actually turn off your heating system because unfortunately it believes that your house is, just say, 25 degrees when your living room is actually only about 21 degrees. But because your corridor's got your vents in it and it's a lot smaller and compacted, it'll warm up a lot faster than the rest of your house. With one of these guys, you can actually just override that system. So even knowing it thinks, like the controller thinks it's 25 degrees, your little thermostat will actually say, well, it's actually 22, so I want to keep this on until such time as this room I want actually heats up to a certain point. So hopefully you enjoy this webinar. As if you need any more information, feel free to contact Digital Home Systems by the office link. If you need to ask me questions in particular, if you send it through to office, it'll get sent through to me without any issues. We also have 2 numbers you can call, which is the as displayed right there, and we also have a showroom office. At the current point in time, the current situation, you might call it, we don't generally allow visitors at the moment. However, once everything starts clearing up a bit, we will actually start expecting people to come through, and we actually have a working showroom as well. So if you want to come through and maybe show potential clients or just have a general idea of how the actual system works, the showroom's open for you to come through. Just give us a call first. If you do have any questions and are a bit too shy to essentially send them through, just feel free to give us a call. We can generally answer most of your questions. Other than that, thank you very much for sitting through this webinar, and have a good day.